Before we proceed any further, viewer discretion is highly recommended. What follows is strictly intended for both educational insight and viewer engagement. This is the exact federal courtroom account from the ongoing legal proceedings involving Sean "Diddy" Combs, as relayed by Inner City Press. Inside a tightly packed courtroom in Manhattan, the protective walls that long surrounded one of hip-hop's most influential figures have finally started to give way, not due to a public statement from a celebrity or the circulation of another damaging video, but due to the revelations of a man the general public had barely heard of until now. That man is Gene Deal, who once worked as Diddy's personal security guard, and although he has spoken out repeatedly over the years, his warnings were largely dismissed, until recently. Now, inside the halls of justice, the words he once uttered in obscurity have transformed into undeniable truths as new footage and courtroom testimonies emerge that eerily corroborate the stories he previously shared. On the 7th day of trial proceedings, courtroom insiders report that members of the jury visibly lost color as one of Deal's previously overlooked claims was shown to be true through video evidence. Diddy's hands reportedly began to shake, and his posture slumped. He appeared shattered. What does it mean when the individual who once safeguarded your life becomes the very person responsible for unraveling your legacy? This goes beyond a simple legal statement. This might mark the critical moment when Diddy's defense started to fall apart in earnest. Let us unpack the impact of Gene Deal's receipts and how they have potentially altered the course of this high-stakes trial. Gene Deal had been vocal for an extended period of time, but his voice was drowned out by public skepticism. Having served as a close protection officer for Sean "Diddy" Combs during the meteoric rise of Bad Boy Records, Deal spent years witnessing firsthand both the polished public image and the chaotic private reality. Through numerous interviews and podcasts, Gene described a shadowy existence hidden behind Diddy's glitzy lifestyle, episodes of rage, manipulation, constant surveillance, and unsettling parties involving well-known celebrities and allegedly underage participants. Until not long ago, these narratives were written off as bitterness or an attempt to stay relevant. But now, during the heart of Diddy's federal trial for sex trafficking, his accusations are not merely resurfacing, they are being validated through courtroom testimony. Deal has stated that Diddy managed his empire with a level of control resembling a military hierarchy rather than a music label. According to him, employees were given highly specific roles, information was carefully concealed, and the notion of privacy was nothing more than an illusion. Deal claims that Diddy exerted influence over everyone from personal assistants to musical artists by using tactics rooted in intimidation, feigned loyalty, or even substance dependency. Years ago, Deal claimed to have witnessed physical confrontations between Diddy and Kim Porter, the late mother of several of his children. "There are things I've seen that I'll carry with me forever," he once confessed. And I stayed, silent for far too long. What's pivotal today is that those specific recollections, particularly those involving exclusive parties and alleged assaults, are now being echoed by new witnesses under oath. These new accounts involve confiscated mobile devices, private areas, heavily intoxicated guests, and elements of coercion. When Officer Israel Flores took the stand and recounted how Cassie was found with a black eye and attempting to flee from Diddy in 2016, just as Deal described years ago, the entire courtroom atmosphere shifted dramatically. For the first time, these weren't mere accusations, they became recognizable patterns. The prosecution appears to be constructing a case that Diddy didn't just lose control on isolated occasions, but actively created and maintained a system to remain in power continuously. And Gene Deal was reportedly present throughout much of it. What's now disturbingly evident is that his long-dismissed accounts might have been factual all along. In most celebrity-related controversies, it takes one undeniable piece of evidence to cause collapse. In this instance, however, the unraveling may be happening because of one unglamorous man with no public persona and seemingly no incentive to lie. Gene Deal wasn't just on the sidelines, he was intimately involved in Diddy's inner circle for many years. When he speaks, it isn't conjecture, it's direct personal knowledge. According to recent commentary from legal experts following the case, the jury may be left with no alternative but to regard Deal's statements with seriousness, particularly because his testimony is not only disturbing, but also consistently aligned with other emerging facts. In a recent interview, Deal said something that resonated chillingly with viewers. You can shield a man's body for years, but you can't shield his soul. He admitted to harboring guilt for remaining quiet during the time when Diddy's alleged behavior was left unchecked. He spoke in detail about so-called freak-offs, covert gatherings where Diddy supposedly coerced both women and men into engaging in sexual acts while documenting every moment. Deal claimed the motivation wasn't strictly indulgence, it was control. He asserted that cameras were always on, capturing footage that could later be weaponized. If anyone ever attempted to betray Diddy, the recordings could be used as devastating. Leverage. These explosive declarations now resonate with claims made by Cassie Ventura, statements included in Lil Rod's federal suit, and allegations from other individuals, many of which reference non-disclosure agreements, clandestine videos, and various forms of intimidation. That consistency makes Deal's narrative increasingly difficult to dismiss. Even more disturbing are Deal's claims that Diddy's mother, Janice Combs, may have contributed to his son's more troubling behaviors. Gene described their household, not as one that curbed control, but one that cultivated it. He alleged that Janice once operated a so-called modeling agency, which was, in reality, a front for a high-class brothel catering to elite clients. Although the court has yet to confirm this, prosecutors appear to be suggesting a broader pattern, that Diddy's actions weren't random, but learned, perfected, and reinforced over time. During one of the most recent trial sessions, an observer inside the courtroom noted that several jurors physically reacted when a witness's account matched what Deal had revealed in interviews years earlier. And when a claim of his that was previously ignored appeared in new court filings, Diddy allegedly muttered something under his breath and requested to leave the courtroom, citing nervousness. It was the first visible crack in his previously unshakable demeanor. Should Gene Deal ultimately testify, something sources close to the prosecution say is highly probable. He won't simply serve as a witness. He will serve as a verifier of the environment Diddy allegedly built, acting as the first individual bold enough to drag it into the open. As Diddy's legal team scrambles to redirect the courtroom narrative, one truth is becoming increasingly apparent. They weren't prepared for someone like Gene Deal. They anticipated denial. They anticipated emotionally volatile former partners. They did not anticipate a calm, resolute former bodyguard with no incentive to fabricate and a recollection that mirrors documented evidence. Deal has publicly said that he cautioned Diddy years earlier, urging him to clean up his behavior, especially following his breakup with Cassie Ventura when legal threats began to surface. He claimed he observed Diddy brushing aside legal advice, rejecting settlements, and provoking conflicts rather than diffusing them. That same behavioral pattern is now repeating in the courtroom. Prosecutors revealed that Diddy turned down several plea bargain offers earlier in the year. Rather than securing an agreement that might have spared him from decades of incarceration, he chose instead to contest every charge. Why? According to Gene Deal, it's because Diddy operates under the belief that he's invincible, but inside a courtroom governed by law, that illusion is breaking apart. On the 6th day of trial, those present said Diddy appeared pale, more gaunt than usual, and emotionally distressed. His hands shook while attorneys cross-examined witnesses. At one point, he requested a brief recess, murmuring, "Excuse me, I'm a bit anxious." This from the same man who once dubbed himself a savage, who mingled with presidents and billionaires, now seemingly pleading for reprieve as his world crumbles. Deal's viewpoint has also proven invaluable in shedding light on what prosecutors are now classifying as organized criminal activity. In his words, this wasn't a man losing control. This was a man carefully coordinating events involving drug connections, event organizers, legal waivers, and contracted security personnel. Today, the court is beginning to portray these events not as far-fetched conspiracy theories, but as structured criminal enterprise activity. And the revelations don't end there. Deal claimed to have witnessed Diddy leveraging his influence to silence staff, compensate victims, or neutralize threats, sometimes through financial incentives and at other times through fear-based pressure. This is precisely the kind of sustained behavior that substantiates charges of racketeering, the type that carries substantial federal penalties. As the trial progresses, the defense team is working feverishly to discredit Deal's account. But with each passing day that he remains off the witness stand, additional evidence seems to corroborate his assertions. Regardless of whether he ultimately testifies, Gene Deal has already left an indelible impact on these proceedings. And for Sean Combs, that may be the most destabilizing reality of all. Gene Deal's testimony not only reinforces the prosecution's case, it reshapes the public's and the jury's understanding of the abuse allegations themselves. For years, stories surrounding Diddy's alleged violent and manipulative conduct were relegated to the tabloid sphere or unattributed online rumors. But now, with Deal offering detailed accounts that align with sworn witness statements and official police documentation, those once dismissed stories have taken on a weight the jury can no longer ignore. In interviews stretching back nearly 10 years, Deal described a violent altercation in which Kim Porter, Diddy's former partner and the mother of 3 of his children, had to defend herself physically by slashing his wrist with a broken object during a particularly aggressive dispute. At the time, Deal's version of events was viewed as embellished. But newly surfaced courtroom testimony has now verified that Porter was indeed observed at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center shortly thereafter, following an undisclosed altercation within a private setting. And although she never addressed the matter, in any public capacity, the synchrony between Deal's timeline and that emergency room report has significantly reinforced the credibility of his account. Deal also articulated, with vivid specificity, the unsettling atmosphere surrounding what have now become infamously known as the freak-offs, the alleged drug-fueled sexual gatherings hosted at Diddy's estate. According to Deal, these occurrences were far from impulsive or impromptu. In fact, they were methodically orchestrated. Security personnel were instructed to seize all mobile devices, lighting conditions were calibrated to exact hues, and attendees were provided with directives regarding where to position themselves and what attire to don. This meticulously organized scenario almost perfectly mirrors what Cassie Ventura and several other women have recounted, testifying that they were invited to partake in sexual acts without providing full, informed consent. Diddy allegedly characterized these events as immersive experiences and was reportedly known to review the video recordings afterward, an act Deal claims he directly observed. Cassie, in her own admissions, revealed that during the initial phase of her involvement with Diddy, she actively assisted in coordinating some of these events, arranging the presence of other women and occasionally sourcing illicit substances. However, she attributed these actions to a profound psychological manipulation that she was subjected to. Once again, Deal's statements corroborate her perspective. According to him, many of the individuals involved didn't even realize they were being exploited. Diddy, as Deal describes, cultivated an environment where people felt indebted to him. This reframing of abuse, from episodes of uncontrolled rage to an intentionally designed system of psychological subjugation, may very well be the most incriminating aspect of Deal's assertions. It suggests that Diddy was not merely someone who lost his temper, but rather someone who allegedly constructed controlled settings in which individuals felt too diminished or too intoxicated to refuse participation. Legally speaking, this depiction moves beyond moral failing and squarely into criminal territory. While the courtroom may represent the public arena, Deal's perspective offers a glimpse into the private, behind-the-scenes reality. As a key enforcer within the Bad Boy organization, his responsibility was to safeguard Diddy. But what he observed beyond the velvet ropes has now evolved into damning evidence. Across numerous podcast interviews, Deal painted Bad Boy Entertainment not as a conventional music label, but rather as a cult-like enterprise where loyalty was coerced through fear, humiliation, and a shared indulgence in hedonism. Excessive drug use, unrestrained sexuality, and physical aggression were not merely permitted, they were expected. Deal further depicted the headquarters as resembling a military-style command hub. Surveillance systems were not limited to deterring fans or intruders. They were strategically aimed inward, intended to monitor employees, associates, and even intimate partners. Everyone was surveilling everyone else, Deal remarked during a 2022 appearance. Nobody was ever sure who the cameras were really targeting. This revelation takes on increased significance in light of prosecutors submitting digital photographs and metadata from surveillance equipment installed in one of Diddy's New York properties, images that allegedly show guests being escorted into isolated rooms. Arguably the most unsettling part of Deal's narrative pertains to what he describes as a grooming protocol. Allegedly, new collaborators, especially women, were subjected to an initiation-like exposure phase, where their limits were covertly tested. They were flown in, supplied with intoxicants, and then observed to see what behaviors they would consent to on camera. Those who resisted were quickly dismissed, Those who acquiesced became regular figures at gatherings, and in some cases, Diddy's romantic partners. Deal's close proximity to Diddy also enabled him to observe how looming threats were discreetly neutralized. One woman, Deal alleges, sought to publicize a drug-related incident involving a younger artist. Within a week, she was quietly sent to Paris with a signed non-disclosure agreement and an envelope of cash. "It's a machine running with terrifying efficiency," Deal stated. "It's not disarray, it's order masked as disorder." Legal analysts emphasize that this distinction is pivotal for the prosecution, portraying the alleged criminal acts not as random or impulsive, but as components of a systematically orchestrated enterprise. Should Deal be called to testify, his account could potentially stitch together years of fragmented accusations into a coherent narrative. He knows the placement of the cameras. He knows when security was instructed to avert their gaze. And he knows how the entire apparatus shielded itself while trafficking in secrecy and silence. Diddy has long curated an image: lavish fur coats, crystal champagne, private aircraft, and those iconic all-white summer parties in the Hamptons. He promoted himself not merely as a music industry mogul, but as the embodiment of affluence and authority. But in court, that carefully constructed persona is eroding, and no one has illustrated that erosion more effectively than Deal. On the 6th day of proceedings, courtroom journalists observed a notable transformation in Diddy's physical appearance. The once commanding aura appeared to vanish. He seemed visibly diminished, gaunt, pale, drained. A reporter affiliated with the Breakfast Club remarked, "It's as though he aged 5 years over 5 days." In previous interviews, Deal had commented that Diddy's ultimate fear wasn't incarceration. It was becoming irrelevant. He could manage prison, Deal said, but irrelevance was unbearable for him. And now, he finds himself in the center of a courtroom drama, where every revelation threatens the legacy he labored to maintain. The prosecution has adopted a calculated approach, not merely presenting facts, but systematically dismantling the myth. Witness after witness has contributed to a portrayal of Diddy as domineering, suspicious, and volatile. Former staff members described his insistence on micromanaging everything, from the music played at his events to the amount of substances distributed to guests. "He didn't just host," one said, "he choreographed every second." This image starkly contrasts with Diddy's defense, which seeks to portray him as a misunderstood creative visionary. But that narrative is faltering. During one particularly incriminating audio recording, allegedly capturing Diddy instructing a woman to enter a secluded room, he flinched noticeably. When the judge inquired if he required a recess, Diddy declined, though his anxious glances at his legal team told another story. Minutes later, he requested a bathroom break and was overheard whispering, "I'm shaking." These behaviors have not gone unnoticed by jurors. Analysts specializing in body language, consulted by media outlets, suggest that Diddy's physical decline, his agitation, subdued demeanor, and pallor may be having more impact on the jury than any one piece of testimony. He no longer resembles a media magnate defending himself. He resembles a man witnessing the collapse of his empire in real time. For decades, Diddy embodied a facade of untouchability. But in the sterile confines of a federal courtroom, that image is dissolving into raw fragility. And with Deal's observations reverberating through the proceedings, what once appeared to be self-assurance now reads as sheer desperation. The jury sees it, the public sees it, and most crucially, Diddy himself is beginning to see it. As the government's case grows increasingly formidable, Diddy's defense team is visibly running out of viable strategies. Their original plan, to frame Cassie Ventura and other accusers as opportunists or embittered former partners, is crumbling under the weight of corroborating testimony from insiders like Deal. What was once portrayed as personal vendettas now appears as systemic exploitation. In one particularly disorganized courtroom episode, defense attorneys attempted to undermine Cassie's credibility by presenting text messages from 2009 that depicted flirtatious and explicit conversations with Diddy. "You enjoyed the freak-offs?" one lawyer said. "You even initiated some of them." Cassie didn't refute the claim. Instead, she reinforced her position, stating, "Yes, I participated because I felt I had no choice." The jury watched as she took responsibility not just for what happened to her, but also for the role she played under coercion. That level of honesty may have bolstered her credibility even further. When defense lawyers tried to introduce Cassie's past associations with Michael B. Jordan and Kid Cudi, the prosecution objected. The judge appeared to agree, signaling that such distractions had no relevance to the core accusations. The moment highlighted the disarray within Diddy's legal defense. Rather than mounting a compelling argument, they were resorting to tabloid spectacle. Meanwhile, Diddy's decisions outside the courtroom have also raised eyebrows. Reports suggest that prominent attorney Benjamin Brafman had advised Diddy in 2023 to settle Cassie's civil case for $10 million, but Diddy allegedly paid $30 million instead. Legal insiders speculate this overpayment was a sign of desperation, a man attempting to stifle a brewing storm before it became a full-blown legal hurricane. Brafman later stepped down. Insiders now say Diddy's current legal team is in conflict over whether to seek a plea deal or continue fighting. According to Deal, Diddy has persistently disregarded legal advice to cooperate. He thinks he can outsmart the feds, Deal said in a widely circulated interview. But he can't. Now, the courtroom is witnessing the unspooling of this once tightly wound narrative. The jury is observing a man once synonymous with control, now making visibly frantic moves. And with Deal providing deeper insight into the motives and mechanics behind these actions, the defense's portrayal of Diddy as a misinterpreted genius is becoming increasingly untenable. Beneath the surface of this trial lies an ominous ripple, an expanding list of individuals possibly facing subpoenas. These include former collaborators, high-profile entertainers, and longtime insiders. What unites them is that they were all close enough to know the truth. Prosecutors are reportedly preparing to summon several of them into testimony. Gandil's disclosures have opened up critical investigative avenues. He has named individuals who attended the infamous parties, artists subjected to grooming, and staff members who willfully ignored what was happening. What once sounded like wild speculation is now, according to multiple reports, forming the foundation for federal indictments. Kane could potentially be called to the witness stand, particularly Dawn Richard and Aubrey O'Day, both of whom have, at various times, come forward with public accusations against Diddy, alleging abuse or deeply harmful psychological manipulation. Should either of these women testify during the proceedings, it could profoundly dismantle the defense's ongoing portrayal of Cassie as merely a bitter, scorned former partner acting alone. Additionally, looming large over the case is the situation involving Diddy's sons, Christian and Justin Combs. Christian has reportedly been implicated in a troubling incident that allegedly took place aboard a private yacht and has since led to a sexual assault lawsuit filed in 2024. Justin, for his part, was reportedly detained during the high-profile raid that occurred at Diddy's estate in September of the same year. Though neither of them has had formal charges brought against them thus far, even the remote possibility that they may be called to testify under oath poses a potentially disastrous turn of events for Diddy's legal standing. Gandil has previously hinted in interviews that the involvement of Diddy's family members went far deeper than the public ever imagined, implying that the boundary between Diddy's sprawling entertainment empire and his intimate personal life had become dangerously indistinct over time. Yet perhaps the most startling and unsettling individual believed to be under scrutiny by the prosecution is none other than Janice Combs, Diddy's own mother. Gandil has made explosive and controversial assertions regarding her alleged participation in, or tolerance of, certain questionable behaviors, including an extraordinary claim that she once operated a brothel under the guise of a legitimate modeling agency. Should any portion of that testimony be verified or backed by supporting evidence, it could escalate the scope of the case from one focused on individual misconduct to a sweeping multi-generational enterprise, effectively building a legal argument that fits a RICO framework. The pivotal question circulating both inside and outside the courtroom is this: if Gandil's testimony continues to gain credibility, how many more people will feel empowered to come forward? And to what extent will the judicial system delve into unraveling this alleged structure of coercion and complicity? As one seasoned courtroom analyst phrased it, this is no longer just about the actions of a single individual. This is now about an entire ecosystem of influence, fear, and systemic silence. And that structure is beginning to fracture. Sean Diddy Combs carefully constructed and presided over one of the most iconic and influential music dynasties of the last 3 decades. Bad Boy Records, the Sean John fashion line, Ciroc Vodka, and Revolt TV were all facets of a brand that embodied luxury, authority, and magnetic charm. However, what was once a monument to success is now collapsing piece by piece under the harsh fluorescent lights of a federal courtroom. For years, Diddy seemed immune to accountability. Allegations would arise and quietly dissipate. Lawsuits were quietly resolved through settlements. People murmured in private, but rarely testified in public. And now, the reasons for that silence are being laid bare. Since 2023, over 60 legal complaints have been filed, revealing that silence wasn't passive, it was often bought, manipulated, or coerced through fear. That wall of silence has finally broken. Gandil's years of forewarnings, long dismissed, as the bitter outbursts of a disgruntled former insider are now forming the very backbone of a case prosecutors are presenting as a meticulously orchestrated, decades-long abuse of influence. And it's likely that Deal won't be the only former confidant to break ranks. Additional witnesses are anticipated, more sealed documents are in the process of being revealed. The so-called freak-off events, the hush payments, and the surveillance tapes, all of it is now transitioning from rumor to admissible evidence. And still, Diddy's legal team clings to the notion that he's merely a high-profile individual being unfairly targeted due to his fame. But that argument has lost its persuasive force. In light of testimony from a trusted former bodyguard who has now become a whistleblower, combined with damning surveillance footage allegedly depicting abusive conduct and corroborating statements from multiple alleged victims, celebrity is no longer a shield. It has become a spotlight, illuminating the darkness rather than concealing it. The implications extend far beyond whether Sean Combs ends up serving prison time. At stake is the very culture he once represented, a culture where wealth and influence allowed one to script not only their own public narrative, but also manipulate the lives of those closest to them, the people they professed to love, the employees they paid, and the individuals they silenced. Now those same people are speaking, the jury is listening. And Diddy, who once choreographed every movement within his curated world, no longer has control over the unfolding narrative. Regardless of whether or not he is ultimately found guilty on each and every charge, one thing is unmistakably evident. The man who was once known as Puff Daddy, later P. Diddy, then simply Diddy, and eventually Love, has lost the one thing he held most dear: control over how the world perceives him, and no strategic rebrand can undo what is now unraveling. Minute by minute in a courtroom where his carefully guarded secrets are being exposed by the very individuals who once stood in his shadow.